Today I'd like to talk about a song called Finnegan's Wake, but before we start that, I feel like I better explain that sometimes in Ireland we can have a very dark sense of humour. In Irish traditional music, very commonly you will see themes of sadness and grief, and then in the final verse of a song there will be maybe an uplifting verse, or throughout the song there'll be an underlying theme of humour underneath the darkness. I might be a little bit biased, but I love the juxtaposition and the contrast that it portrays. I think that this dark sense of humour has always been present throughout Irish culture. I think it's probably been used as a coping mechanism throughout times of a lot of grief and a lot of sadness and a lot of darkness. So it's not unusual for us to find a sense of humour in things that people would commonly describe as quite sombre or sad occasions. If you know Hosier's hit song Take Me to Church, the first two opening lines of that song are, "My lover's got a humour, she's the giggle at a funeral." And I think that this is quintessentially Irish. I think it's Irish sense of humour to a T, and not to be taken literally in that we would all start be laughing at a funeral, but more so that we can find oftentimes humour within those really awful, sad times. Like I said, it's a coping mechanism. We don't find everything funny for the sake of it. It's our medicine. We just never really like to take ourselves or anything else too seriously. That's all. The song that I'm going to be looking at today is called Finnegan's Wake, and this song has famously been covered by the Dubliners, by the Clancy Brothers, by the High Kings, and by the Irish Rovers. It's very well known in Ireland. The song was first published in New York in 1864. And there are a lot of people who claim authorship of it, but there is no definitive author of it. And also, side note, we have a very famous author and a literary hero from Ireland, and his name is James Joyce. His final work, which was written in 1939, also goes by the same name, and it is thought to be based around the theme of Finnegan's Wake, the song. I chose this song because it has these underlying themes of humour underneath something very sombre, and I just think it's a very good example of Irish humour. Wakes are something that we perform here in Ireland when somebody dies, and it is very universal. Not everybody does it for various reasons. There might be people who don't, but generally that's what we do. And it involves when a person dies, we take them usually home to their own house. We wake them, as in lay them out, often in their own beds, in their own bedrooms. But again, that can vary from person to person and house to house. They could be in the sitting room, they could be anywhere in the house, but oftentimes it's in their own bedroom. And it gives people a chance to come in and say goodbye, to help the family to grieve and to give support to the family in the few days leading up to the funeral. It can really help to lift spirits. In my own experience in going to wakes, you'll usually have people walking in who knew the deceased, they knew that person that died, and they can come in and tell the family all these stories about how that person affected their lives, or funny stories that the family had never heard about. And I'm sure to some people and some cultures it might sound a bit intimidating. For us, it's something very beautiful and helps us to celebrate life rather than grieve the death as soon as the person dies. And yeah, it's a really beautiful occasion to celebrate that person and to hear all these stories about them and to see the impact that they really made during their lives. This song in particular, like I said, is called Finnegan's Wake, and it's about a gentleman named Tim Finnegan who obviously dies, and it's the story of what happens at his wake. So I'll play it for you and then we can have a chat about it afterwards. So here we go. Tim Finnegan lived in Walkin Street, a gentle Irishman, mighty odd. He did beautiful brogues, so rich and sweet, to rise in the world, sure he carried a hod. You see the sort of a tippling way, with a love for the liquor, per Tim was born, to help a man with his work each day, a drop of the cratur every morn. Work for the daniel, dance to your pair, knew of the floor, your trotters shit. Wasn't it the truth? I tell you, lots of fun at Finnegan's Wake. Mornin Tim got rather full, his head felt heavy rises, Timothy's rising from the bed. Whirl your whiskey around like blazes, thunder and jays, did you think I was dead? Whack for the Daniel, dance to your partner, well the floor, your trotter shade. Wasn't it the truth? I tell you, lots of fun at Finnegan's Wake. So I hope you enjoyed that. And now I'll explain some of what the song is about. So the story describes the life of Tim Finnegan, well, rather the death of Tim Finnegan. So it starts off, Tim Finnegan lived in Walkin Street, a gentle Irishman, mighty odd, and he had a beautiful brogue so rich and sweet, and to rise in the world he carried a hod. And so he was a lovely man, he had a nice accent, he was a gentle soul, and he was a builder because he carried a hod, and a hod is a tool of the building trade which carries bricks. And it also goes on then to say that he was born with an awful love for the drink, and it says a drop of the cratur every morn. Cratur is an Irish slang word, and that comes from the word creature, so cratur, and it could be used to describe something like drink, but then it can also be used as like a term of endearment, where you'd say to a little kid, come here to me, cratur. It's I always liked it, I think it's a lovely word. So then it goes on to say that this particular morning he had a bit too much to drink, and when he got to the top of the ladder his head felt heavy and he fell off and cracked his skull, and his friends picked him up and carried him home and laid him out on his bed. And then it goes on to say that Mrs. Finnegan, presumably his wife, she brought them in tay, which is tea in Irish, tay and cakes and pipes and tobacco and whiskey punch. Again, all these very usual for a wake. She served them sandwiches and some tea and a bit of drink as well. So as the wake ensues, all the friends are coming to come and visit him, and they're all sitting around and having a drink, and there's a lady there by the name of Biddy O'Brien, and Biddy O'Brien starts to get a bit overly emotional about the situation and starts to cry and asks Tim, why did you have to go and die, and I've never seen a corpse as beautiful as you. And Paddy McGee tells her to shut her gob, and a gob is a mouth. In the next verse, Maggie O'Connor says that she will sort it out, and she says, look, Biddy, calm it down. And Biddy goes for her, gives her a belt in the gob, and then all out war ensues, and everybody starts fighting each other. And you'll hear that they refer to shillelagh law was all the rage, and in my last video I explained in depth where the word shillelagh comes from, so if you want to understand that further, go back and look at that one. And yeah, and they all start going for each other and beating living daylights out of each other. They're all presumably quite full of drink at this stage, and they're all quite emotional, so it doesn't take much to kick things off. And then in the final verse of the song, it goes on to say, Mickey Maguire, he ducked his head as a naggin of whiskey flew at him. Naggin, it's like a little small, it's kind of the smallest bottle of whiskey you can get. And pocket-sized, nice. So yeah, in the final verse it goes on to say that Mickey Maguire ducked his head as a naggin of whiskey flew at him, and it missed him, and it fell on the bed, and the whiskey went all over Tim. And then it goes on to say that this causes Tim to revive from the dead and sit up in the bed and say, did you think I was dead? And that is kind of the end of the story of Tim Finnegan. But I just think it's really beautiful. I think it's kind of humorous. I think there's so much again to describe in the song. The fact that it is the drink which kills him, and it's also the drink which brings him back to life. And another lovely thing to note is that oscuelga in Irish, the word for whiskey is ishkabaha, and ishkabaha literally translates into the water of life. So it's kind of cyclical, and it kind of tells you a lot maybe about Ireland and Irish culture, that the fact that, yeah, our word for whiskey is water of life. But I think it's really beautiful that it's what kills him, but it's also what revives him from the bed. And maybe that was all he needed in the first place, was just a few drinks or someone to give him a drink, and it would have woken him up. So that is the story of Tim Finnegan and his wake and the events which unfolded. And I think the lessons to be taken away are don't have a drop of the cratur in the morning, especially if you get up the top of the ladder. And maybe be cautious as to how much drink you serve at a wake, or else something similar might happen. High emotions and alcohol, not the best combination. But yeah, Same as always, if you have any questions, leave them in the comments below. If I can answer them, I will. And if you have any requests, also feel free to leave them in the comments below and I might be able to get around to them. And I hope you enjoyed learning about Tim Finnegan and his wake. And slán.